Bonjour mesdames et messieurs et bienvenue. Bienvenue à cette conférence PREZODE qui va nous occuper aujourd'hui où ensemble nous allons essayer de trouver des solutions pour sortir de cette ère des pandémies, comme elle a été appelée dans pas mal de cercles. Cet événement se tient dans le cadre de la présidence française du Conseil de l'Union européenne et nous aurons aujourd'hui le plaisir d'accueillir une trentaine d'orateurs au cours de ce qui promet donc d'être une journée bien remplie et très riche en échanges et en discussions. Et justement, à ce propos, et pour assurer un maximum d'échanges, je voudrais prier tous nos orateurs de bien vouloir se tenir au temps qui leur est imparti, de façon à nous permettre d'avoir aussi des échanges avec vous, notre audience, vous qui nous suivez en ligne. Nous essaierons de répondre autant que possible à vos questions, peut-être pas toutes, mais nous allons essayer de garder du temps à la fin des différentes sessions pour avoir un échange avec vous. Vous pouvez donc envoyer vos questions par la partie chat dans l'interface de la conférence. Vous envoyez vos questions et nous essaierons d'y répondre aussi rapidement et aussi souvent que possible. Pendant toute cette journée, vous bénéficierez aussi d'une interprétation simultanée en français et en anglais. Pour ma part, je commence en français ce matin, je passerai à l'anglais après, mais vous pouvez donc choisir le canal qui vous intéresse et votre langue de prédilection. Et enfin, nous avons aussi un hashtag pour ceux d'entre vous qui veulent tweeter, qui veulent promouvoir l'événement ou exprimer des commentaires sur les réseaux sociaux, hashtag PREZODE. Donc, n'hésitez pas là non plus à faire la promotion de nos discussions. Qu'est-ce que l'initiative PREZODE et comment est-ce qu'elle progresse? Comment est-ce qu'elle a progressé depuis son lancement? Pour nous aider à planter le décor ce matin, je vais inviter notre premier orateur, Monsieur Jean-Luc Angot, qui est envoyé spécial du président de la République française, à partager avec nous tout le développement de l'initiative depuis son lancement. Bonjour Monsieur Angot et bienvenue.
Bonjour. Bonjour, merci beaucoup. Bienvenue à cet événement PREZODE organisé dans le cadre de la présidence française du Conseil de l'Union européenne. Merci d'être présents nombreux, plus de 400 participants à cet événement. Nous espérons que cette journée sera instructive et fructueuse et donnera lieu à de nouvelles collaborations. La crise Covid-19 nous a clairement montré l'importance de prévenir l'émergence de maladies infectieuses qui sont, dans les 3/4 des cas, d'origine animale. Nous devons agir pour éviter le franchissement de la barrière d'espèces pour les agents pathogènes animaux. L'événement d'aujourd'hui représente un moment clé pour la prévention des pandémies d'origine animale. Une présentation détaillée de PREZODE vous sera donnée au cours de la matinée afin d'exposer les objectifs et la structure de l'initiative. En introduction, je souhaite partager avec vous certains aspects qui revêtent à mon sens une grande importance. À ce jour, 8 pays, dont la Belgique et une centaine d'organismes de recherche, universités, ONG ou organismes privés à travers le monde, sont devenus partenaires de l'initiative en signant la déclaration d'intention de PREZODE, qui bénéficie en outre du soutien des organisations internationales compétentes. PREZODE vise à favoriser une collaboration multilatérale en réunissant de nombreux pays en Europe ou ailleurs. PREZODE combine recherche et activités opérationnelles, production de nouvelles connaissances et décisions publiques. Afin de favoriser l'appropriation et la mise en œuvre des acquis de la collaboration scientifique, sur la base notamment de la tenue d'ateliers régionaux de co-construction, l'appui politique des États est indispensable. L'émergence des zoonoses étant un enjeu mondial, ce soutien doit venir de tous les pays, qu'il s'agisse de territoires d'émergence ou non, dotés de groupes de recherche très actifs ou non, disposant de systèmes de santé structurés ou non. Nous ne pourrons réussir que s'il existe une mobilisation internationale alliant compétences et expériences croisées. L'initiative PREZODE est un exemple emblématique de la mise en œuvre du concept One Health et d'une approche multilatérale permettant le développement de complémentarité et de synergie. De nombreuses activités ont déjà démarré dans les domaines de la préparation et de la réponse à la pandémie. Ils sont extrêmement importants pour s'assurer que nous soyons aussi prêts que possible si une nouvelle crise sanitaire émerge, avec des vaccins, des équipements de protection, des traitements. Toutefois, comme plusieurs rapports l'ont maintenant démontré, le financement international des actions liées à la prévention n'est pas suffisant, même s'il en coûte plus de 100 fois moins pour investir dans la prévention que pour contrôler les futures pandémies. Il est donc temps de manifester collectivement notre adhésion au principe de prévention et de le faire en rejoignant l'initiative et en signant la déclaration d'intention PREZODE. Je remercie INRAE, le CIRAD et l'IRD, dont les dirigeants sont présents, et les intervenants des différents pays qui participent à cet événement. Nous sommes honorés de la participation de plusieurs ministres qui prendront part à une table ronde à la fin de cet événement. Dans les prochaines semaines, nous tiendrons une première réunion du comité des pays signataires et observateurs pour échanger sur la gouvernance et sur la feuille de route 2022 de PREZODE. Les États membres de l'Union européenne sont tous invités à se joindre à l'initiative et à participer à sa gouvernance et à l'élaboration de sa stratégie. Je souhaite un grand succès à cet événement et longue vie à PREZODE pour le bien de l'humanité. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Angot. Merci de nous avoir permis effectivement de planter un petit peu le décor pour cette journée importante de discussion. Et nous allons immédiatement progresser un petit peu plus avant, essayer de mieux appréhender le rôle de PREZODE et les progrès déjà accomplis grâce à nos 3 prochains orateurs. Et pour cela, j'ai le plaisir d'accueillir à la fois en présentiel et en ligne Monsieur Benjamin Roche, qui est conseiller scientifique du PDG sur la stratégie One Health à l'IRD, l'Institut de recherche pour le développement. Bonjour Monsieur Roche. Monsieur Roche, vous êtes en ligne? Oui, voilà, je vous vois. Monsieur Jean-François Soussana, qui lui est présent avec nous, qui est vice-président aux affaires internationales à l'INRAE. Et Madame Marisa Père, qui est conseillère scientifique du PDG sur la stratégie One Health au CIRAD, qui est le Centre de coopération internationale en recherche agronomique pour le développement. Madame Père, bonjour, bienvenue à tous les 3. Monsieur Roche, je vous invite à ouvrir cette présentation et à nous donner un petit peu plus de détails sur l'avancement du projet PREZODE.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Can I have the slides? Yes, perfect. So good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining this event. As Jean-Luc Angot just said, so we're going to present a little bit where we are, where we stand with the development of the PREZODE initiative. So next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of context, next, please. So we know that since the beginning of the 70s, 80s, we have entered into what we call an emergence era. We see a lot of emerging infections through the world since the beginning of the 80s. So the number of outbreaks have been multiplied by 4 since during the last 40 years. And so as you can see on this map, which records all the different kind of emergence events through the world, you can see that there is no continent that is really protected against this kind of outbreaks. So next, please. So also, as Jean-Luc said, so most of these outbreaks are actually due to zoonoses. So zoonoses are these pathogens that are primarily circulating in animal population and tend to spill over to human population with which they are in contact. So these contact patterns between animals and humans can take very different shapes. It can be through live animal markets, through wildlife hunting, through domestic animals, or through intensive wildlife farming, just to name the most prevalent one. So we can see that our contact with animal populations are actually increasing the risk of emerging zoonotic diseases. Next slide, please. So, of course, we have heard a lot about all these different kind of outbreaks during the last decades, like Ebola, like avian flu, like Zika, chikungunya, and so on and so forth. But we have also to keep in mind that emerging infectious disease is also an European story. We can be exposed to different kind of threats in Europe. which could be due to the introduction of zoonotic pathogens from outside of Europe. But we can also record new spillover events in Europe due to our contact also with different animal species. And we can also suffer from an increased incidence or geographic range of zoonotic pathogens. So I'm going to give you just a few examples about this kind of emergence. So next slide, please. So as I said, we are recording a new spillover event, so meaning that new emerging infections that are originating from Europe. So if we define emergence event as the original case of or cluster of cases representing an infectious disease emerging in human population for the first time, if we keep this definition for an emerging infectious disease, so worldwide since 1970, we have recorded almost 150 events of outbreaks of pathogen outbreaks from wildlife origin. So this is a lot, and of course, among these 150 events, we have recorded 24 events of emerging infections that have been originated from Europe. So we can see that Europe can also suffer from this kind of new spillover events. So next slide, please. So another example, which is a very intriguing one, is the Weissenal virus. This is a clear example of an introduction of zoonotic pathogen, which is due to an increased incidence or geographic range of zoonotic pathogen. So Weissenal virus is a virus transmitted mostly between birds and mosquito, and that can sometimes reach vertebrate hosts, including humans. So since by 2028, by 2018, so we have recorded in Europe almost 1,500 cases in humans and 170 deaths. So this is also a veterinary problem because we have recorded almost 300 outbreaks in horses in Europe during that time. So next slide, please. So another example, which is as well an example of a new spillover event and also an introduction of zoonotic pathogens, is the influenza emergence. So we know that this virus mainly circulates in wild birds, and that can be transported in Europe mainly through wild migratory birds. But we also see a lot of new emergence of influenza viruses in Europe, especially in domestic poultry. So we can see that with this influenza emergence case, that we can have an importation of new zoonotic pathogens from outside Europe, but we can also have an origin of this kind of spillover event inside Europe. So next slide, please. And so to summarize, we see that we are exposed to a lot of new emerging infections, and this is something that is currently increasing. So we see also that with the COVID-19, that even if we try to be as much prepared as we can, we can never really control and tackle correctly this kind of emerging infections. So this is why, in articulation with this preparedness approach, we really need also a change in paradigm. So we really need to move our target from preparedness to a better prevention. So this is a little bit the originality of the PREZODE initiatives, is to have two priorities. So the first one is to make stronger One Health surveillance networks across the world, and especially in low-income countries, and to try to envision new integrative and sustainable prevention strategies in order to make social ecosystem resilient to zoonotic disease emergence. And so to do that, of course, we will rely first on the improvement of our scientific knowledge, which is dramatically important to have something really driven by the scientific approach. But we also want to engage all the different actors with all the different, from all the different sectors. And so this is why we really believe that the bottom-up approach is a correct one. And this is why we have developed this initiative in co-construction with all the different actors. And I'll stop here and I let the floor to my colleague Jean-François. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Roche, merci beaucoup. Nous allons maintenant passer à la contribution de l'INRAE en écoutant Monsieur Soussana.
Oui, c'est donc Jean-François Soussana. Merci. Je vais reprendre les diapositives. We carry on with slides. Thank you. Thanks to Benjamin, we could see this important context for this international initiative. And I'd like to remind you that the PREZODE initiative was launched 1 year ago at the One Planet Summit by President Emmanuel Macron of France. And we received during this launch strong support from the President of the European Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, from the FAO through the voice of its DG, and also we got support from the other organizations of the Tripartite Plus and of the World Bank. So we have really anchored, I may say, PREZODE in this international landscape. So the overall ambition is to work with countries, with other initiatives, with stakeholders, to avoid animal-borne pandemics. And to do so, we need also to work with the poorest communities to ensure their livelihoods and their food security. So in this way, PREZODE is not only about the SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, it is also matching other sustainable development goals. When we think about the boundaries of PREZODE, we see, and this was already explained by Benjamin, that it is highly complementary to what is currently done in terms of responses, let's say with vaccines, for example. It is also complementing the preparedness approach, since PREZODE stops at the time of the spillover to humans. We are working, therefore, in PREZODE on the pathogen detection on the local to global surveillance systems, and the center of PREZODE is really on prevention. How can we assess the risks? How can we reduce risk with the early warning systems? And how can we work in a One Health approach, combining the implications of ecological health, animal health, and links to humans? And as was well explained by Benjamin, reducing risks implies systemic changes. It is changing behaviors, it is changing pressures on biodiversity, and therefore these are really large issues which complement, I would say, other goals of the international community, such as mitigating climate change and protecting biodiversity. So One Health and other dimensions are highly complementary, and it is in this way that we can tackle this issue of zoonotic emergencies. So the objectives of PREZODE is to form a framework first for implementing and coordinating the research projects, the surveillance networks, and the operational projects with different health agencies across countries to maximize their impact. And you understand that no country can success in this alone. We need really to strengthen international cooperation. Then we need to have a collaborative platform for sharing the knowledge, including from the past projects, from the current projects, and projects we will support through PREZODE, and for capitalizing on activities in different regions of the world. So there we need to work across initiatives, and we have started some workshops across initiatives in order to create this collaborative platform, where we will also have a big focus on the data sharing. And then we can create a resource center available for decision makers to enable the public policies. And in this way, through public policies, through changes in the behaviors and in the pressures on biodiversity, to reduce the risks of zoonotic infectious disease emergence. So as Jean-Luc explained, we have, after 1 year, 7 countries that have signed the Declaration of Intent and around 100 institutions. You can see here this community, which is quickly growing. And we would like to have more partners in the future. And to become a partner, as was explained by Jean-Luc, it is very simple. You just need to sign the Declaration of Intent, which is online on our website. And in this way, you can take part into the PREZODE initiative. So what do we foresee for this? We will try to get an interim governance launched rather soon. We need just the support of the countries that have signed already the initiative. And in this interim governance, we will prepare the final international governance of PREZODE that will be launched next year. And we will also adopt a strategic agenda of the initiative, and Marisa will explain this further. So we need a General Assembly, obviously, with one representative per signatory member. We may have in the General Assembly observers, organizations, and countries. Then we have an interim steering committee. In this committee, we would have one representative per signatory country. We would also have international organizations as observers until they sign the declaration of intent. And we would have 2 elected representatives per world regions, plus observer countries if they like to be part of the interim steering committee. So in this way, we can move and really become this international initiative that we need to have. And the Secretariat is staffed currently by CIRAD and IRD, the 3 French research organizations, but obviously we would welcome some other contributions from the members. So thank you for considering signing the Declaration of Intent if you did not do so yet. Thank you, and now I hand it over to Marisa.
Yes, thank you very much.
Madame Père, oui, je vous vois à l'écran.
Bonjour.
Voilà, nous vous entendons. Donc, merci de nous rejoindre pour terminer cette présentation à 3 voix avec les 3 organisations impliquées dans PREZODE. Madame Père, à vous.
Merci beaucoup.
Voilà.
I will now describe further the action and the next step of the initiative. So in order to promote this paradigm change towards prevention through a bottom-up approach, PREZODE was built around the 5 pillars in order to identify and understand risk and co-develop solutions to reduce them, and also strengthen early warning systems and to make them operational from local to global. So the first pillar is about understanding and identifying the risk. The second one is about reducing the risk by finding solutions by the people that are implemented or involved in the practices that can generate or be linked with any risks. Then the pillar 3 is about developing early warning system to be able to react quickly to the first sign of spillover and to develop these systems by and for the people that are at the front line of the risk, implementing them, and then to upscale this sharing of information from the local to the global scale through the pillar 4. All this work needs to be done by engaging and empowering local and national stakeholders in order to be able to strengthen this approach, and this is the object of pillar 5. Next slide, please. So what we've been doing in the first year, so in 2021, we've been spending the time to frame the initiative and to ensure its co-development with all the partners and relevant stakeholders interested in promoting this approach with us by doing regional co-design workshops, but also scientific events. And all this work will help us building the strategic, scientific and operational agenda. And I will come back to that later. So what we've been doing as well is ensuring the alignment and collaboration with other existing and planned initiatives to ensure synergy between the actions. Also working forward to further collaborate with international organizations, and also working with donors to secure additional funding for the initiatives, engaging countries as well, and scientific and development partners. So this year in 2022, we will finalize the strategic agenda. We will work on the governance, as mentioned by Jean-François. And we will also implement the first action plan of PREZODE through the African project funded by the French Development Agency, and that will be presented later today. And of course, we will carry on working on the engagement of countries and other international organizations and interested partners. And then we will work further in the next few years on the follow-up implementation plans upon 2025 and beyond. Next slide, please. So the PREZODE co-construction process was based on the theory of change approach, which implies thinking of the impact that we want to reach to be able to develop the activities that will be able to promote this impact. So we worked in 3 phases. The first one, so across the 9th region of the world, we worked together on building up a common vision of the future that we would like to reach and how PREZODE can contribute to this vision, and also which obstacles can impair this the reaching of this vision with a world without pandemic threats. Then following this work, we organized the second step workshop to be able to identify the changes that would be required to be implemented to lever these obstacles, and also who would need to be involved, who actors needs to implement changes. And then we carried on building up on this work on how to promote such changes and which activities needs to be implemented to do so. Next slide, please. So this work last year involved more than 1,500 contributors, a pool of contributors from around 122 countries over the world that worked. So we worked all together building up this vision and operational and strategic plan of PREZODE. Next slide, please. And this work also allowed us to map the other initiatives at the international, regional, but also national levels that we would want to work with and ensure collaboration and synergy to make sure that works are not duplicated and that the resources are well used. So that will ensure optimal connection, communication, and collaboration. Next slide, please. So all this work will help us to develop this year the strategic, scientific, and operational agenda of PREZODE that will be based on its pillars and its 5 pillars, and where we would implement it and make it give it more flesh in terms of research needs and gaps and operational needs. Of course, this strategic agenda will also add elements on how to synchronize with other agendas and other transformation expected and synergy with other initiatives. And this agenda will also state key elements of the initiatives in terms of governance and funding, and also partnership and cooperation approach. We will also work on an impact evaluation strategy to ensure that we will be able to monitor and identify the impact that we would like to reach. Next slide, please. So to conclude, PREZODE aims really to build up a common framework to foster collaboration and impact, promoting prevention as a bottom-up approach. And that includes building up collaboration with other partners, securing required level of funding to be able to do this work and reach our goals and impact, and building up joint programs. So in 2022, as we've mentioned before, we will set up the first interim governance of the initiative, including a meeting with signatory countries and meeting with all partners. And we will work on the adoption of the strategic agenda that will be co-developed with all the partners until June 2022. And of course, we will launch the first operational programs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci Madame Père, merci à vous trois de nous avoir aidé à planter le décor, mais aussi d'avoir passé en revue les premières réalisations de PREZODE au cours de cette première année et aussi ses nombreuses ambitions, en espérant que vos appels respectifs seront entendus. Et pour continuer dans cette même veine de décor et de mise en place des circonstances dans lesquelles PREZODE travaille et des développements qui sont en cours, je voudrais inviter Monsieur Philippe Mauguin, le PDG de l'INRAE, à nous présenter un peu plus avant l'initiative One Health et l'avancement de l'initiative. Monsieur Mauguin, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Merci de nous rejoindre.
Merci à vous. Bonjour à toutes et tous. Je suis très heureux évidemment de participer à cet événement inscrit dans la présidence française de l'Union européenne autour de PREZODE. Ça a déjà été très bien dit par Jean-Luc Angot et les collègues. L'enjeu des maladies infectieuses humaines est évidemment majeur pour l'avenir de l'humanité. On a vu qu'elles sont très largement d'origine animale, pour près de 60% d'entre elles, qu'elles viennent souvent de la faune sauvage, soit directement sur l'homme, soit en passant par l'élevage et la faune domestique. Plus de 2 milliards de personnes touchées par an, et on met de côté même évidemment la pandémie coronavirus, et plus de 2 millions de personnes décédées chaque année à cause de ces zoonoses. Donc, enjeu de santé publique majeur. qui n'épargne pas l'Europe, hein. Benjamin Roche l'a très clairement évoqué en montrant à la fois le nombre de zoonoses qui avaient concerné notre continent. On a parlé du West Nile virus, et donc on ne peut pas considérer que les problèmes ils seraient juste à gérer dans des zones plus tropicales qui seraient des incubateurs à virus. On est soit des relais, soit aussi en tant que continent européen une source possible de pandémie. Donc on doit pour toutes ces raisons se mobiliser au niveau de politique, mais aussi au niveau de la recherche. On n'a pas le temps de tout détailler ici, mais les impacts socio-économiques de ces zoonoses sont gigantesques. Ils se chiffrent en centaines de milliards de dollars. Des études ont montré que le coût du traitement de ces maladies était 100 fois supérieur au coût de la prévention. C'est bien ça l'enjeu de PREZODE, c'est d'essayer par la recherche, par les échanges, de convaincre l'ensemble des acteurs, des autorités publiques d'investir sur la prévention pour limiter ensuite les impacts. Et c'est vraiment ça qui est la motivation, je crois, forte des chercheurs qui ont beaucoup de connaissances à partager, c'est de pouvoir contribuer à faire émerger ce concept One Health. Alors, c'est cette approche transdisciplinaire entre la santé animale, la santé humaine, la santé environnementale, on peut dire qu'elle a été évidemment mise en évidence il y a un certain nombre d'années. On pense notamment au 19e siècle aux travaux de Pasteur, mais il faut reconnaître que sur les dernières décennies, on a peut-être trop procédé de façon cloisonnée dans la science entre la recherche médicale d'un côté, la recherche en santé animale ou la recherche sur l'environnement. Et c'est vraiment peut-être le moment de changer, d'accélérer l'interdisciplinarité, la transdisciplinarité aussi, puisqu'il faut de plus en plus associer les acteurs très en amont si on veut avoir un impact ensuite. Alors l'Europe, elle a déjà fait des choses, il faut le reconnaître, je pense notamment à l'EJP One Health, mais il faut poursuivre cette dynamique. C'est aussi l'occasion de lancer un appel à nos collègues de la Commission européenne qui vont intervenir pendant la journée. On a besoin d'amplifier les moyens consacrés par l'Europe, et la présidente de la Commission a donné un très fort signal l'an dernier dans les nouveaux partenariats et les nouveaux programmes de l'Europe. Il va falloir, vu la complexité des interactions qu'il faut comprendre entre les animaux, les humains, l'environnement, apporter des solutions, Jean-François Soussana l'a dit aussi, à l'échelle des systèmes. Il faut qu'on mette en place des grandes infrastructures de recherche pour étudier les interactions entre la biodiversité, les émergences virales et les barrières, les changements d'espèces. Et ça, c'est des investissements qui sont aussi très forts. Donc, on va démarrer cette année, et c'est une bonne chose, à la fois dans les laboratoires avec des moyens. Vous allez avoir, juste après moi, une table ronde avec déjà des présentations de programmes de recherche. Et c'est ça qu'il faut qu'on amplifie. Mais on va aussi démarrer sur des territoires pilotes. Ça sera évoqué aussi dans la journée, au Cambodge, en Guinée, au Cameroun, à Madagascar. Et c'est important qu'on ait à la fois des avancées scientifiques dans les labos au niveau de la modélisation, des études, mais aussi qu'on ait des terrains concrets sur lesquels on avance sur les mesures de prévention. Donc, je ne reviendrai pas sur tout ce qu'ont dit mes collègues, une forte mobilisation d'ores et déjà qu'il faut saluer, avec plus de 100 instituts de recherche dans 40 pays. Et en Europe, une trentaine d'organismes. C'est important que l'Europe soit finalement motrice dans cette dynamique. Peut-être un ou deux messages avant de passer la parole aux collègues sur l'importance que notre travail de PREZODE soit bien connecté au Global Plan of Action for One Health que porte la tripartite plus avec la FAO, l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, l'Organisation internationale des épizooties et l'UNEP. Il faut qu'on soit très connecté parce que c'est des actions que porte la tripartite visent à justement réduire les pandémies zoonotiques, à réduire les zoonoses aussi endémiques négligées. On aura aussi besoin du soutien de la Banque mondiale, puis si on veut déployer nos actions à l'échelle internationale, le fait qu'on ait des liens forts avec la Banque mondiale et PREZODE, c'est important. Voilà, notre objectif, ça a été dit, on l'a compris, c'est de partager la science, de renforcer nos efforts de recherche pour mettre à disposition des acteurs des politiques publiques, des travaux dans un format adapté. Donc, on va aussi travailler avec le panel d'experts de haut niveau une seule santé qui a été mis en place. On va essayer de développer des actions dans les territoires, je l'ai dit. Et finalement, mon message aussi d'optimisme en ce début de matinée, c'est de constater à la fois une mobilisation forte des scientifiques. Et quand on a fait des forums, des webinaires dans tous les continents, ça a vraiment été très encourageant. Un vrai engouement scientifique, mais aussi une mobilisation des gouvernements, des agences de santé et des acteurs de terrain avec, rien que pour l'événement européen, 200 participants qui venaient de 20 pays différents. Donc ça, c'est un message d'espoir, on va dire, pour nous encourager tout au long de la journée. Un grand merci à la présidente de la Commission européenne, Ursula von der Leyen, qui a très vite répondu à l'appel du président Macron. Un grand merci aux représentants des directions générales de la Commission européenne qui nous font l'honneur de participer aujourd'hui. Et c'est important qu'on ait plein de directions générales concernées. La santé, l'environnement, la recherche, l'agriculture sont toutes attendues. Et je vous souhaite maintenant que nous puissions, grâce à cette journée, préparer des nouvelles actions européennes. Des nouvelles actions en soutien à la recherche, des nouvelles actions en matière de politique de coopération, de nouvelles actions en matière de politique de santé publique. Un grand merci à toutes et à tous et une excellente journée.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Mauguin, et merci d'avoir établi en effet tous ces liens qui sont complètement essentiels au travail de tous les scientifiques qui nous suivent aujourd'hui et qui vont aussi être au cœur des différentes discussions que nous allons avoir. Je vais maintenant passer à l'anglais pour le restant de la journée. C'est aussi un signal que je donne à nos interprètes et à ceux d'entre vous qui ont suivi en français jusqu'à maintenant. Comme ça, vous pouvez vous connecter sur le canal qui vous intéresse. Now that we do have the background against which we will be working throughout the day, it's time to dig a little deeper into the various examples of research initiatives within the EU that have already been launched. And a quick reminder to all of you, we will try to save time for questions at the end of the session. So please feel free to send your questions so that we can raise them with our speakers at the end. I would like to welcome first Ms. Maria Grazia Dente, who's a senior researcher at the National Center for Global Health, that's the Istituto Superiore di Sanità in Italy. Ms. Dente, good morning. You have been working on One Health prevention and preparedness for a while, so could you please share some of your plans with us? Ms. Dente?
Yes,
Yes,
good morning.
good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good morning. Do you think that I can have my presentation? How is the organization? I have few slides to, okay, thank you very much. Okay, you already introduced myself. Next slide. So today I have the pleasure and to share with you one of our initiatives that seems very in line with the vision and the aims of PREZODE. We, in fact, produce a policy brief, a multidisciplinary effort with all the ISS, that is Istituto Superiore di Sanità in short, international experts, including also Dr. Ons Mandar, that you know is now one of the members of the One Health high-level expert panel. And we had also more Dr. Tike Hievedao, that is now appointed as a leader of the WHO Hub for Pandemic and Epidemic Intelligence, just based in Berlin. So next one, please. Of course, ISS is involved since many years in efforts that are trying to integrate One Health strategies in preparedness and prevention plan. Next one, please. So we are very much involved also in activities, projects, networks, events, and programs that are trying to, let's say, use the benefit on One Health approach for preparedness. According to WHO, preparedness is a system, complex system that should be able to effectively anticipate, respond to, and recover from the impacts of likely imminent, emerging, and current emergencies. Next one, please. But we know that unfortunately, as was already said, for what is related to some aspects of preparedness, we have still many gaps, many challenges to cope with. For example, as was already stressed, prevention capacities of preparedness that should be a strong aspect is still very weak, and here the detection capacities. Also the problem of, let's say, identify and contrast the drivers of potential pandemic epidemic. The fact that many times preparedness is set up without considering the multiplicity of the actors, stakeholder disciplines, and related interests involved. What is also to be considered that from the beginning, we should allow a prompt access and sharing of technologies, information, and data. Moreover, we saw, especially during this pandemic, that any preparedness strategy should address also the exacerbation of social inequalities that a pandemic could bring about. Next one, please. So keeping this one in mind, so the challenges that we are in front of us, and I will not stress again something that was already stressed well before me, we really should agree that One Health is really something that could help in facing these challenges, especially in the definition, in the comprehensive definition that was given by the One Health high-level expert panel for One Health at the end of last year. Next one, please. But what is hampering the integration of One Health approach in prevention and preparedness? The fact that many times One Health is not integrated, is not mainstreamed since the beginning in preparedness and prevention strategies. We have many times a One Health plan for specific threats, but we have not a comprehensive, let's say, national prevention and preparedness plan that connects, let's say, both these aspects and integrate One Health approach. Why I'm saying this? If we are not addressing this point, of course, we will not have any capacity to address, for example, drivers and signal at the One Health interface, because specific metrics, indicators, related tools are not being developed. If we will accept the idea that One Health should be an integral part of any preparedness strategies, then for sure we will agree to enhance accordingly governance capacities, research, and capacity building related to this. Next one, please. So what we did to help this, implementation of vision. You know that last year there was the G20, and he, as any years, of course, but was very much connected with global health and COVID-19. And there is the think tank 20 group that is the official engagement of the G20 that is bringing together leading think tanks and research centers worldwide. It serves as an ideas bank of the G20 and aims to provide research-based policy recommendations to the G20 leaders. So ISS, and with the contribution of international experts, as I said, were asked by T20 to develop a policy brief that could address specific aspects of global health after COVID-19. The next one, please. So, as I said, we developed this policy brief. I have no time to go in detail, so I invited you to really have a look at this policy brief. What we did, we tried to describe what in brief I told now to you. So which are the shortcomings, I mean, the problems that are affecting now with the challenges that we have, the preparedness. And we try to explain the rationale of using One Health to address these shortcomings. To conclude, let's say, our recommendation to the G20, next one, please. We, of course, provide some final recommendations that were mainly devoted to the governance of the One Health in preparedness. We, of course, address the facts that many times there are not clear principles that are guiding different disciplines, sectors, to work together in a coherent way with specific resource and so on. And also address the fact that training should be done since the beginning, preparing people for working together, for sharing data, for sharing information that is really something that is affecting preparedness. So these many and other few recommendations were delivered to the G20. Many of them were really addressed, and I would say that we took home also a good promise from G20. This will be also a theme for this year G20. So it will be discussed further, and we hope to have something going ahead and really addressing health threats with a different perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dente. Thank you. And stay with us because you will be part of our panel discussion in a few minutes. I would like now to welcome Mr. Thomas Mettenleiter, who's the president of the Friedrich Loeffler Institute, and that is the Federal Research Institute for Animal Health in Germany. Good morning, Mr. Mettenleiter. Mr. Mettenleiter is also the co-chair of the One Health high-level expert panel, which we have already talked about this morning. So to follow up on Ms. Dente's presentation, Mr. Mettenleiter, we're hoping that you can bring us into the research that you have been carrying out.
Oui, bonjour and good morning. Thanks very much for the invitation. Indeed, I have a scientific background. I'm a virologist by training. And I feel like I have two hats on today. one as a representative of German research on One Health, and the other one as the co-chair of the One Health high-level expert panel. And this will also be reflected in the few slides that I'm going to show. Can I have the first one, please? Yeah, the next one. Please go on already. So actually, I mean, following or during this pandemic situation, lots of projects and programs have been initiated basically globally. So I'm not going to treat you to an endless list of these different projects. There's definitely in the situation that we are discussing right now, one which is worthwhile mentioning. This is the One Health EJP, which is a pre-pandemic project that has been launched prior to the situation with COVID-19. I think it was a very wise move by the EU to put this on, take this on board and finance that. And this will then hopefully be expanded into something that also deals with One Health. And I'm sure my colleague Hein Imberechts, who will talk this afternoon, will specify this in more detail. Next, please. So there are quite significant number of projects and programs. I mean, the question that I would like to tackle is, I mean, do we have the infrastructure in the recipients to really deal with these questions, with these projects? And I would like to mention 4 examples from Germany. One is that in 2006, following the threat of the first zoonotic H5N1 avian influenza incursion into Europe, 4 ministries of the Federal Republic of Germany, they actually joined in a joint research agreement on zoonosis. And this developed into a national platform for zoonosis research. This is a network that connects basically all people interested, researchers interested in research on zoonosis onto one platform. And this has been extremely successful over the years and is still maintained. And I think it's one of the foundations that we have, at least in this country, for the work on One Health. And this is supposed to be extended. Next slide, please. This is next one. This is supposed to be extended probably into a joint research agreement and joint research platform on One Health. Next slide. At the FLI, we also have taken this challenge on board. And since April 2020, we have a 12th specialist institute or department at our FLI, which is the Institute for International Animal Health and One Health. The FLI is a federal authority. So, I mean, its mission is primarily directed towards the national situation, but we have a tremendous international outreach that is now then also realized in this particular department. Next one. A novel approach that some of you might not yet know is that not far away from our headquarters here on Insel Riems, as it's 12 kilometers at the Greifswald site, the Helmholtz institution, which is one of the great research institutions in Germany, they founded a Helmholtz Institute for One Health. I think this is the first one, at least that we have in Germany, a research infrastructure that from the beginning is dealing with the One Health issues, and in particular was at equal level with all 3 of the parts, which is human health, animal health, as well as ecosystem health. The 4 founding partners are the Helmholtz Center for Infection Research, dealing with more infectology in the human sector, the medical faculty here at the University of Greifswald, University of Greifswald for the environmental part, and the Friedrich Loeffler Institute for the animal part. So I think, I mean, this is a sustainable infrastructure that will be relevant for time to come. Next one, please. I switched to the global level, and I'm very glad to see Serge also around. Serge is a member of this OLAP, One Health high-level expert panel, and this is probably the most significant change in the global situation during the last 15 months. Next slide. This is a true Franco-German initiative, or was a true Franco-German initiative that was launched on top of the cooperation between the tripartite, WHO, OIE, and FAO, which lasted for over a decade. also focusing on issues that have to do with One Health, in particular antimicrobial resistance. But this has then been supplemented by the United Nations Environmental Programme, so that we have now 4 equal partners that call themselves the Tripartite Plus. I prefer the name Quadripartite to really make it clear that all 4 are at the same level. Next slide, please. This international body is an advisory body. It's an advisory panel to the 4 partners. It consists of 26 experts from 20 countries worldwide. That lasts from New Zealand in the east to the west coast, North America in the west. It's always interesting when we have our Zoom meetings to see that some are close to going to bed and the other one have an early morning coffee. We have 4 previous working groups, now themes that deal with One Health's definition and implementation, with One Health's inventory, with surveillance, and with risk analysis. And this basically relates to what we've heard before. I think these are the major topics and the major problems that we have to deal with. Still, the OLAB is not an executive body. The OLAB is not a funding body. The OLAB is an advisory body to the 4 partners, and we take that very seriously. Next slide, please. It was already mentioned by Maria Grazia. One of the early outputs that we had by the end of last year was OLAB's definition of One Health. This is an expanded definition. It's an updated definition from the older ones. And what's particularly relevant is that this is a definition that all the 4 partners supported. So this is a partner that is accepted. This is a definition that is accepted by all of them. I think this is a good baseline for further work and probably also for the future in the situation here in the European Union as well. So it is One Health is an integrated, unifying approach that aims to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and ecosystems. There are some more aspects that we write there. Particularly, I would like to stress the importance of the ecosystem approach as well. Next slide. This is based on underlying principles. There is equity, there is parity, equilibrium. You see all these different stewardship and transdisciplinarity. I don't want to go into too much detail. You can find this on our homepage, hopefully soon as well. But I think, this sets the stage on what One Health actually should mean and should be tackled at the global situation. Next one. And this comes together with a visual. And this visual just combines what I've just said. Most important for today are probably the 4 rotating wheels, which are coordination, collaboration, communication, and capacity building. And I see this event today as a major event also towards reaching these goals. We need to cooperate, we need to coordinate, we need to communicate, and we need to build capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mettenleiter. I would like now to invite Mr. Wim van der Poel, who's the research leader on Global One Health, and ERADZE at the Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Mr. van der Poel is also the chair of the scientific committee of the IRC on STAR IDAS. And we would like to hear your reaction to the 2 previous presentations, but also an introduction to the Global One Health approach. Good morning, Mr. van der Poel.
Good morning, and thanks to the organizers for inviting us to present our One Health initiatives in the Netherlands. I will show some flavor of what we have developed in the Netherlands and also together with European partners and even beyond Europe. Can I have my first slide, please? In the Netherlands, and especially in my university, we started or we boosted the One Health approach by launching the Global One Health theme. In this Global One Health theme, together with the internal partners, we have written a paper for the Trilateral Commission on Global One Health, coining this Global One Health approach. And this paper can still be found on the websites of the Trilateral Commission, but also on the website of our university. With this initiative, we also formed the Global One Health partnership, research partnership, with 4 top-ranked agricultural universities in the world, based in the US, Davis, Nanjing, China, our university, and Massey in New Zealand. In this partnership, we exchange PhDs and we develop international programs on Global One Health. Actually, we just had our annual meeting with the partnership this week. Also, together with the theme, we connected with other universities and research centers in the Netherlands to work on One Health and formed the Netherlands Center for One Health. In this network, we work together with all universities on health disciplines in research. And the network develops research programs, of which the picture on the right, the One Health Pact, is the largest one at the moment. In that research program, we address all kinds of problems related to arboviruses in the Netherlands and also outside the Netherlands. In this project, there are 26 PhDs and there are more than 10 partners of the Netherlands Center of One Health involved. Can I have my next slide, please? On the European level, and within the EJP One Health that was already mentioned and will be discussed later today by Hein Inbrechts, the coordinator, we very recently, last year, developed the COVERIN project. The COVERIN project, which stands for Coronavirus Research Integration, is focusing on the coronavirus issues that have recently occurred and resulted in the pandemic we're having now. In this research integrative project, we work on harmonizing detection, developing more protocols for characterizing coronaviruses, work on risk assessment, control risks of coronavirus, and also further characterization of the viruses that occur. And we hope with that kind of research, we can develop better preparedness for coronaviruses in future. So this is a very interesting and important project on coronavirus to develop better preparedness. Can I have the next slide, please? And on this final slide, you can see the initiative that we developed in Wageningen University and Research, the Early Response and Rapid Action on Zoonotic Emergencies project. In this project, the mission will be to strengthen research capacity to reduce the risk of future pandemics. On the left picture, you can see all the different actions, activities in the project, but to summarize, it's focusing on preparedness, it's focusing on prevention and response of all kinds of emerging zoonoses and other kind of infections. And in the end, also work on recovery and learning. On the right picture in this slide, you can see a very recent report on zoonosis. It's called Zoonosis Insight, that was written in the Netherlands, commissioned by the Dutch Parliament. And this report is written by zoonosis experts and has included 70 recommendations to better control zoonosis in the future. With the projects and the initiatives I have shown and shortly discussed, we hope to connect with other initiatives in Europe. And that's also what we're doing in the International Research Consortium of Animal Health, to organize workshops to better connect all the different initiatives. And we will have a next workshop with all that kind of initiatives in March again, to make sure that we can avoid or can try to avoid overlaps between the different initiatives and have good collaboration with all kinds of initiatives. So we hope to connect to the PREZODE initiative with all the projects that I have shortly discussed. And that's where I would like to end my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. van der Poel. So now I would like to turn to Ms. Susanna Sternberg-Leverin, who's the Director of Future One Health at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, also known as SLU. So, Ms. Sternberg-Leverin, what is SLU Future One Health? We can see you, but we cannot hear you.
Yes, sorry,
There
I
we are.
forgot to unmute. Thank you very much. Yes, SLU Future One Health is a transdisciplinary research platform within the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and we've been there for a while, but not so long. On the other hand, we have another organization that is not so organized, which is a research network that's called One Health Sweden, that's been in place since 2010. And this SLU has been part of that research network. So it's a loosely connected network for researchers interested in mainly zoonotic diseases, but also other aspects of One Health. And our research platform is the contact point in our university for transdisciplinary research in One Health. And since our university covers at least 2 of the 3 aspects of One Health, we think that we are fairly equipped to be a sort of launching pad for part of this research in Sweden. I had a very brief presentation. It's just one picture because I wanted to illustrate. Yeah, there it is. So you can take the next picture. I understood my task a little bit different. So if you bring on the next slide, please. I'm just going to describe the overall ongoing research on zoonosis in Sweden. We are, of course, part of many of our researchers are taking part in international initiatives and these large consortia. We are heavily involved in many of the EU projects that are ongoing on zoonotic diseases and preparedness and so on. But I'm not listing them now. I'm just in awe of all these initiatives that are ongoing at the same time, and I hope we can somehow manage to link them together or well, take advantage of all the different outcomes of these different initiatives. What we're doing in Sweden, people have been obviously very interested in zoonotic diseases and research in zoonotic diseases for quite some time, since this research network was launched in 2010, and it attracted researchers from all our Swedish universities. The founders are within Uppsala University, Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and the Swedish National Veterinary Institute and the Linnaeus University. So it's 3 universities and 1 veterinary institute that founded the network, but it's attracted researchers from all Swedish universities. People are working. Now, I would like, since I'm a veterinarian, I would like to say first that in this picture, it seems like the humans are only the recipients of this, but animals are not only the sources of zoonosis, but they're also recipients and potential vectors. There's been lots of examples of sort of COVID and animals being the source, but animals have been recipients of the disease from people as well. So I would like to point out the circular aspects of this, which is very obvious when you're a veterinarian and working in these settings. So we have ongoing research on zoonosis and climate change. A lot of initiatives, since we are a country that's sort of stretching from north to south quite far, and we have some very pressing issues in the northern parts. So there's lots of research on climate change. That's particularly vector-borne diseases, because that's something that's expected to change. The situation is expected to change with climate change, with vectors finding new habitats and so on. So there's research looking at the prevalence of vectors, the optimal conditions for vector survival in future scenarios, and also vector competence, what can be expected in Sweden, lots on tick-borne diseases and also on mosquito-borne diseases in Sweden and in other countries. So we've got people looking at Rift Valley fever, which is not something that we see in Sweden. and don't expect to see very soon, but we have vectors for it. Looking at Pumala virus, which is a hantavirus, tick-borne encephalitis, Borrelia, anaplasma, these sort of diseases among wildlife, among vectors, among domestic animals and people, and trying to link these things together. So some researchers are looking at just one of these in this chain of events, but they are connecting, and via these researcher networks, people are discussing and finding new collaborators and so on. So we can look at the entire chain of the whole One Health system. There's also quite a bit of research on waterborne diseases. That's been water quality modeling, modeling of water as a vector for transmission of infectious diseases. So these infectious agents can stem from people. There's looking at wastewater treatment plants and offal from that, but also runoff from agricultural enterprises. So that's with the animals as being the source, but water is very obviously something that's connecting animals and people and the environment. So whatever contaminates water will end up in all these systems. So there's been modeling of grazing animals as recipients of zoonosis in water, but also people, of course, because everybody drinks water, and water is a recipient of zoonotic agents in the environment. There's been research on source attribution to see the origin of zoonotic agents in water. A lot on Salmonella and E. coli, enterotoxin and toxemic E. coli, Cryptosporidia. Antimicrobial resistance is a very big issue in Sweden. We have a One Health action plan and lots of One Health research on antimicrobial resistance, which is also to be seen as a zoonotic infection that can be transmitted throughout all these. Not perhaps something that we have this kind of urgent pandemic preparedness for, but it's called the silent pandemic. So I would expect that it's relevant for this as well. There's lots also of research in surveillance in animals, syndromic surveillance in people and animals. We've been looking at particularly Salmonella, avian influenza, echinococci, antimicrobial resistance again, but also general surveillance and early detection systems and so on. And disease modeling in animals and wildlife. We have quite a lot of wildlife research in Sweden. We have a long history of surveillance in wildlife and trying to detect diseases in wildlife. And that has also evolved into more researched projects directed at wildlife and trying to understand wildlife population dynamics and disease dynamics in wildlife populations. And there's also a lot of qualitative and quantitative studies to inform preparedness, where there's work on farmers and vets and policymakers to understand both what people know, what they are aware of, what they are prepared for, how we can prepare them better, and so on. A lot on biosecurity on farms. We have also a long history of implementing biosecurity in animal production, because we banned antimicrobial feed additives a long time ago, so we needed to. But this has also emerged into more systematic programs and work on disease awareness, and it's also being linked to antimicrobial resistance prevention and so on. So the general, I think we are not extremely organized. It's not very top down in the zoonotic disease research. And there are a lot of initiatives on AMR. So there's a research program, there's a One Health action plan, and so on. And this sort of trickles into zoonotic diseases. But the zoonotic disease research is very vivid and ongoing, and there's lots of initiatives in this, lots of individual researchers being engaged in One Health research or in zoonotic research. And also, as I said, they are connected in this research network that is very useful for this, bringing people together from the different research fields, because we've noticed that there is a tendency, it's really difficult for research to be broad and detailed. That's a big challenge with transdisciplinary research, and transdisciplinary research is not just, I mean, then you have different research disciplines, but then to bring together people who work with environmental issues, with people who work with animal diseases and people who work with human diseases, that is a challenge, but it's very lucrative, it's very fruitful collaborations. And we've noticed that a lot of these voluntary initiatives where people are just offered to meet, that creates a lot of research and a lot of collaborative projects. So the last slide is just some links to the One Health Sweden network is the first one, and the second one is our SLU Future One Health platform. And then there is the National Veterinary Institute Zoonosis Center and a research group in Umeå University who is doing a lot on vector-borne zoonosis. So thank you very much. I will put some of these links in the chat, but I realize that not everybody can see the chat. So that's, if you Google One Health Sweden and SLU Future One Health, you will find us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you indeed for sharing these information sources, which are essential for many of our listeners. Having heard all these presentations and the variety of research programs and research initiatives that are carried out, I would like now to turn to Jean-Charles Cavit, who's a research program officer at the Directorate General for Agriculture, and he's working on research and innovation coordination at the European Commission. Mr. Cavit, we've heard already about the support that the Commission brings to these initiatives, and I would be very curious to hear your comments on the various paths, research paths that have already been mentioned, and also to hear how they're perceived and encouraged by the Commission. So over to you. Good morning, Mr. Cavit.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the invitation, and happy to take part in this session. As you said, I'm research programming officer in DG Agriculture. It looks like I may be the only commission official today present in your event, so I have some knowledge on the initiatives in other commission services, but it will not be enough to substitute the expertise of colleagues working on environment, on public health domain, or international cooperation. So we heard indeed a number of initiatives using a One Health approach, or main components of it. Some clearly mirror, let's say, the focus of PREZODE on emerging zoonotic diseases, with preparedness, obviously, prevention, anticipation very much in mind. Some of these initiatives clearly tend to go beyond only research, but also looking into policy and risk management. Clearly, what we heard about this initiative is that they highlight the need for international cooperation. And I would say, indeed, the Italian information that we had is an advocacy for clearly a global approach, and it's raising certain issues relating to setting up a One Health based conceptual framework against global health threats. And clearly PREZODE is embedded into a global One Health approach. Looking at emerging zoonosis is part of One Health. One Health is a concept, and it's a bit larger concept, I would say. And I think this session today is about One Health, even if the focus is at the end of the day probably on really emerging zoonotic diseases. And I would say PREZODE is very ambitious. Already, I would say operationalizing a One Health approach is challenging, whether it's multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, multi-scale dimensions, and going global, and to some extent beyond research and development only, into maybe risk, at least risk assessment, but risk management and maybe policy is really adding to the challenge. And for sure, the national initiatives we heard about will clearly strengthen the One Health operationalization and could certainly contribute and be part of the PREZODE initiative. Now, if we look at emerging zoonotic disease, maybe the EU territory may not be a main hotspot for genuine emergence of new diseases, which, if we look at what was presented earlier, quite often come from wildlife. Livestock can play a role there, obviously, but certainly introduction and spread of those diseases is an important risk for Europe, and obviously surveillance and preparedness will be important issues. And in that respect, certainly the surveillance at different scales, global, national, local levels, the sharing of data for notably risk assessment will be key component. And clearly, as was mentioned, the EU has been supporting and will go on supporting and programming and funding of One Health related research in support to the related policies. And I'll come back quickly to this in a moment. And certainly PREZODE is an important initiative in this respect. Just as a reminder of the research and innovation framework at EU level, I mean, the current program, Horizon Europe, and the previous European program for funding research and innovation at EU level, they are really complementing activities of the member states. Actually, we usually consider that we represent the funding at EU level, represent maybe 10% of what is spent on research and development in the EU countries. And we focus essentially on transnational research, and we try with our research initiatives to bring added value, coordinate research activities. And what we can say as well is that the EU framework program for funding research is probably among the most open programs, or the program most open to international cooperation, so international cooperation beyond the EU. And as was mentioned, I think, by Mr. Mauguin before, is that if we look at the history, One Health is not really new in the EU approach and thinking. If we go back to even the 60s with the first directive on the veterinary matters, they have a serious dimension on public health protection. And I would like to go back to an issue which is maybe not about emerging diseases, zoonotic disease, but still, we will have to look at it more deeply. But the issue that I had to face when I was a policymaker in the EU, dealing with the review of the zoonosis legislation. And actually, we revised the legislation of monitoring of zoonosis, but also salmonella control. And to reinforce the measures to control salmonella in the primary sector, in animals, in livestock, we were happy to have the Danish experience, which linked actually the epidemiology of salmonella in animal production with salmonellosis cases in humans. And with control programs targeting specific livestock species, they succeeded in decreasing this. And we had this example and we used it and we managed to have this legislation that was making really the connection between what we could do in salmonella in animals, which usually do not lead to diseases in animals, but really for public health impact on humans. And I think it was reasonably successful. Now, more recently, I would say an important initiative that was mentioned here before is the fight against antimicrobial resistance. This is more recent. The first plan to fight against antimicrobial resistance at EU level was in 2011. Then a second one, clearly highlighted as a One Health action plan against AMR, is from 2017. And there are three components, three pillars, let's say. One is making the EU a best practice region on antimicrobial resistance. The second pillar is about boosting research, development and innovation. And the last one is shaping the global agenda on AMR. So these three pillars are important. If we would look at this with about emerging zoonosis, we could have kind of the same issue. But certainly the regulatory framework at EU level on One Health varies depending on which pillar or which domain of One Health you look at. Certainly the capacity to legislate and take action in the veterinary domain is quite different from what we can do at EU level on the medical sector. And environment is again a different issue. So when we think about not only research but risk assessment and possibly policy, we have to keep in mind this question. Now moving to another example, I think in the research and development domain, I think the One Health dimension is there also in research and development at EU level. One example given is the European Joint Programme for One Health, the One Health CGP, and it will be presented here later. It is addressing foodborne zoonosis, AMR, and also emerging threat to some extent. And it's interesting to see that this partnership or this European Joint Programme, let's say, emerged to some extent or is a follow-up to a Framework Programme 6 project, which was a network of excellence called MedVetNet, where there were veterinary institutes and medical institutes working together to a certain extent. It was back in before 2010 and 2006, 2005. And then we have the Joint Programming Initiative Antimicrobial Resistance, GPI-AMR, which is a country-driven initiative born, I think, in 2013, and is supported to some extent by Horizon 2020, the previous framework program. It's mainly composed of public health and research funding organization ministries from 28 countries with international cooperation countries. And GPI-AMR is aligning, aims to align in particular research funding through calls. And they are looking in their strategic research and innovation agenda in different elements, from therapeutics to diagnostics to surveillance, etc., etc. I think all aspects. And actually, GPI-AMR looked progressively more into One Health aspects, and the environment and the veterinary dimension in AMR were subject to one of the calls of GPI-AMR in particular. So, and of course, I could not list all the different collaborative projects that we have in the Horizon 2020. We have also infrastructure projects. We heard about the need for infrastructures. We have a project called VetBionet on looking at facilities, BSL 2-3 facilities to do experiments on highly dangerous, risky pathogens, or Transvac about infrastructure on vaccines. And certainly operationalizing One Health is still, even with this experience, quite challenging at EU level. And I would say it's even maybe more challenging at EU level than at national level, because we have to deal with multiple countries with different systems. And you have to keep in account, I guess it's not necessarily very different from what's happening in countries, but the different aspects of One Health at policy level are dealt with or addressed in different commission services. I mean, from DG Santé on the health to DG Environment, DG Climat when it comes to climate, the DG INPA for international cooperation, not to mention also DG RTD and DG Agri, because we are involved in this for the research and development and innovation. So this is to set up the policy framework. Now on research and development, to some extent, it's reflecting a bit this kind of fragmentation, I would say, because we have under Horizon Europe different pillars, different programs, but also different pillars. And the public health research is under a certain cluster, cluster 1, while another cluster, cluster 6, is dealing with environment and agriculture. And the limits, the boundaries between the remits of these clusters is not always perfectly clear-cut. And when you look into developing initiatives on One Health, on research and development, this can be a kind of a hurdle. Now, I would say that under the framework program now, we will still have collaborative projects. And for instance, in the work program 21-22, under cluster 6, which is about, which includes environment and agriculture and food, there was a topic actually that is aims at exploring the connection between biodiversity, ecosystem services, pandemics, and epidemic risks. So this is just an example. But if we look at more initiative with more of a structuring effect, we have a renewed approach in Horizon Europe on European partnerships. We had ERANETs and different types of partnerships in Horizon 2020. This is more or less revised and renewed, and we want to go with fewer but probably bigger partnerships compared to Horizon 2020. And we will have, in particular, the co-funded partnerships where EU brings part of the budget and money, and funders and research entities will bring matching funds to foster coordination of national research programs, essentially. And I can maybe mention at least one existing and several planned such partnerships that will be, I think, relevant to certainly One Health, and to a certain extent to PREZODE focus on emerging zoonotic diseases. There will be, or there is already, a partnership called Biodiversa Plus, which is focusing very much on biodiversity related research. And my understanding is that they intended to develop a flagship, so probably a kind of a core flagship about biodiversity and health in the future. I don't know exactly when, but really Biodiversa Plus is actually a follow-up to an ERANET, a big ERANET that was there in Horizon 2020, which actually organized a joint call on biodiversity and its influence on animal, human, and plant health. This was a call in 2018, 2019. So this is one which is probably more on environment and biodiversity. Now we plan to have also more in the domain of agriculture, animal and livestock. We plan to have a partnership on animal health and welfare, planned for probably 2024, which will address not only pure animal disease, but also zoonosis and their impact on public health. And it will not necessarily focus only on livestock, on farmed animals, but also on wildlife where relevant. There, a strategic research and innovation agenda is being developed and should be more or less finalized by the end of this year, hopefully. In the same vein of co-funded partnerships, but now more in the, let's say, public health sector, are planned two other partnerships, one on One Health AMR. So we are not there in emerging zoonotic disease, but very relevant to One Health. And it will certainly build on and be complementary and go beyond existing initiatives such as the GPI AMR, antimicrobial resistance, that I mentioned earlier, or the One Health European Joint Program that you will hear about later. And the idea is to integrate key actors for AMR in a One Health approach, encompassing the field of human, veterinary, and environmental disciplines, and looking at the broad spectrum of pathogens. Now, this is another one, again, sorry, a strategic research and innovation agenda. It should be developed quite soon. And normally a coordination action will help also into developing this area. And the last one I wanted to mention, I'm nearly at the end, a planned partnership on pandemic preparedness, which is also under Cluster 1. If you remember, I mentioned Cluster 1, more the public health medical domain in Horizon Europe. This pandemic preparedness is there really to respond to calls for better coordination of pandemic preparedness research. And the Commission is developing again there a joint strategic research and innovation agenda on preparedness research with the EU member states, and in the context of this future partnership. And I think this partnership will really be a key contributor, to the new ERA, this Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority at EU level, which was established very recently, against the background of the COVID crisis, established in September. And this is a demonstration in a way with ERA that even in the medical domain, where the capacity to act and regulate of the European Commission at that EU level does not prevent from having such initiatives for preparedness and developing of countermeasures through the ERA, the authority I just mentioned. So the priority there will be for the SRA to develop a plan to prevent and to achieve efficient and integrated control of emerging infectious diseases, both at individual and global levels. It will be accompanied by EU-wide infrastructures and accompanied also by other initiatives such as the European COVID-19 data platform and other initiatives like this. So you see that we may not have at EU level one big mega project on One Health or emerging zoonotic diseases, but we have several of these projects either ongoing or planned that should help very much into addressing issues like the ones you have mentioned. And clearly, I think the motto there is that the coordination and cooperation and collaboration between different initiatives within the EU, but also together with the countries. I mentioned initially that the EU level is there to facilitate, to foster cooperation among countries, but also facilitate innovation. But we have to work a lot with countries, and we want to work a lot with countries and be complementary to these initiatives, and we try for this. And with the different, for instance, planned partnerships that we have in mind, we will ensure that there is first, hopefully, no duplication of efforts, but that every aspect needed to address relevant One Health issues, be it emerging infectious diseases or addressed, and nothing is left behind.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cavit. And indeed, in many of the presentations we've had so far, the importance of ties and bridges has been stressed by many of our speakers. So I would like now to invite Mr. Serge Morand, who is Research Director at the National Centre for Scientific Research, the CNRS, in France. And he's also a member of the One Health High-Level Expert Group and an expert on the knowledge management body of the EU Eclipse initiative. Mr. Morand, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. So over to you then.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I will not have any presentation, just to give you some thoughts. And especially it's nice to have heard my colleagues and the honorable member of the commission. So first, because why are there so many emerging and outbreak of infectious disease that affect not only humans, animals, but also even plants? The data speak very clearly. We face an epidemics of epidemics. The data also speak clearly at identifying the likely drivers. Environmental changes, such as climate change, agriculture expansion, livestock intensification, forest conversion, urban growth, and biodiversity at threat. All of these global drivers are increasing the local risks of spillover on local disease transmission, while global trade and travels enhance the global transmission and the risk of pandemics. Facing these global threats, we need, and we have already discussed, better interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, but also better intersectorality. and better science policy dialogues to prevent new outbreaks on epidemics locally and globally. Now, first, I will take my first hat as a member of the French CNRS, and I have to acknowledge my research institution, the CNRS Institute of Ecology and Environment, to bridge interface between scientific domains in connection with other institutes of CNRS, biological science and the Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences, but also with other institutions such as INRAE, IRD, CIRAD. And in this respect, I can cite the Health Environmental Research Agenda for Europe and its large consortium led by INSERM with, for France, the involvement of CNRS, ANSES, and INRAE. But this is only one part of an effective contribution of translational science to policymakers. Crossing boundaries between research and policymakers implies an effective intersectorality among the relevant sectors. And now, I take the hat of Eclipse that play an important role as a boundary spanner, fostering interconnections across organizations, sectors, and academic disciplines in order to tackle these complex issues we are discussing today, emerging zoonotic disease and biodiversity at the interface between human health, animal health, and ecosystem health. So in a nutshell, Eclipse was created as a European Union funded project in 2016 to help government, institutions, businesses, and NGOs make better informed decisions when it comes to biodiversity and ecosystem services in Europe. So finally, Eclipse really contributes to enhancing the legitimacy and transparency of the science policy society interface. And since December 2020, Eclipse is functioning as a hybrid mechanisms incorporated into the alternate NGO. There are several, and I would just finish to this with the organization of Eclipse. There are different governance bodies in Eclipse. I don't have the time to detail all their roles, but I'm just inviting you to look at the website. But I mentioned two. The Knowledge Coordination Body, which has a member, which role is to select the requests to be processed by Eclipse and to ensure that the selected requests are well answered. So these requests can come from many inter-organization projects and even the European Commission, as I will tell you now. And the second, which is the methods expert group, who provides and shares knowledge about the different available methods for knowledge collation, appraisal, and synthesis to respond to each request. The ongoing requests made by the European Commission to Eclipse are on biodiversity and epidemics. So we frame these requests during a cross-sectoral workshop last May, co-organized between Eclipse and the new Knowledge Center for Biodiversity. The workshop gathered 40 participants, including a representative of European Commission services, but also with scientists, also including OLEP and PREZODE to be there. And the participants developed a potential evidence needed for Eclipse to process. First, participating or developing a strategic research agenda on biodiversity and pandemics. Second, better understandings of the impact of the European policies on the emergence and spread of emerging infectious disease in the third countries, which is really important as well. But we have to give the right and the good science to help these European policies. And third, to identify and prioritize of monitored ecosystems areas with good methodology to improve the surveillance systems for the prevention of zoonotic emerging disease. So Eclipse is in the process of scoping and selecting this request And we have to have a concrete output by October 2022. So, and this output is really about understanding how biodiversity loss, degradation, and dysfunctional ecosystems influence emerging infectious disease, something that also OLEP are discussing and are working on, and PREZODE, and also to support the identification and monitoring of hotspot region of high risk of emerging infectious disease. And have to remember now that we have a new body also from the WHO, the SAGO, that is devoted to this aspect, and but also OLEP and also PREZODE. And last but not least, to enhance the biodiversity perspective within the One Health approach in relation to emerging infectious disease. But, and I will finish with this, I must say that the success of the request on pandemics on biodiversity really depends on the will of the stakeholders. On here, the various commission service of the European Commission that should really find a way to act really as an intersectoral way, recluster, so through an intersectoral coordination mechanism that really help the science and the science policy dialogue to really have an input for the European policy, research, but also the wide policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morand. And indeed, to pick up on what you were saying about the European Commission and to reassure Mr. Kavit, he isn't the only representative of the Commission we have with us today, because we will have representatives from DG INTPA and DG RTD this afternoon. So that also reflects the involvement indeed of various Directorate Generals from the Commission. Mr. Angot, you have heard all these presentations. I'm sure that from your point of view, they're extremely important, and you must have some comments to make, some feedback to give us.
Merci. Je voulais vraiment remercier tous les intervenants et saluer toutes les initiatives en matière de One Health, qu'elles soient nationales ou transnationales. Alors on voit qu'au-delà de la prévention, certaines d'entre elles vont jusqu'à la préparation, la réponse, le capacity building. Mais je rappelle que PREZODE, outre le fait que la signature de la déclaration d'intention montre un soutien à l'initiative PREZODE, c'est aussi la manifestation d'une adhésion à la prévention, qui est vraiment au cœur de nos préoccupations. Et on pourrait très bien imaginer des soutiens croisés de différentes initiatives sur le sujet de la prévention, et que PREZODE est aussi un rôle de coopération, de coordination, de fédération en fait de toutes les initiatives dans le domaine de la prévention des pandémies d'origine zoonotique.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ongo. So we have received quite a few questions from our audience, and we will now be able to reach out to our speakers, including the speakers of the very first session. So I'd like to make sure that Ms. Per and Mr. Roche are still with us, because I do have a couple of questions for them. So thank you for joining us again. But my first question will be to Jean-François Susana. Dr. Per mentioned that the 2022 plans include securing the required level of funding, and that's absolutely essential, of course. We need funding. So which funding sources will be addressed or have already been committed to finance PREZODE?
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, let me remind everybody that becoming member of PREZODE by signing the declaration of intent does not involve any financial commitment, and it is also not legally binding. So that's the first thing I wanted to explain again. Well, about funding, we have to see PREZODE, and this was just reminded to us by Jean-Luc, that we are seeking to have this ambitious program across initiatives supported both by countries, by European Commission, and also by international organizations. So certainly there will not be a single funding source. Rather, we have funding in different countries, funding by international organizations, including, for instance, the World Bank, that can contribute to the program. So we see PREZODE as a way of coordinating those funding sources or helping coordinate those funding sources by establishing a platform to see how we can create synergies across initiatives, across programs. I should mention that the French government has committed resources to PREZODE, first of all through a national priority research program devoted to PREZODE, which receives 30 million euros, and second, through some international cooperation supported by the French Development Agency, AFD, that will receive 10 million, that receives already 10 million euros this year and will receive 20 million euros next year and the year after. So that are the main funding sources from the French government. But here again, we could see already that the European Commission and also a number of countries in Europe are having some further funding resources, and that we need to create synergies across those programs and initiatives to reach the goals of PREZODE. Thank you.
Thank you. My second question will actually be to Ms. Pear. Now, Ms. Pear, in the preparation of, or in the building of the WHO's hub in Berlin, which is currently being constructed, the One Health approach seems to be very much the focus. It seems to be at the forefront of the preoccupation of those building it. So it brings together all the data that we have mentioned. And how does PREZODE plan to interact with this WHO hub?
Yes, thank you very much for this important question. So the aim of PREZODE is really to ensure synergy with and between the other initiatives. And as Jean-François mentioned earlier, we really aim to ensure cooperation between prevention, supported by PREZODE, and preparedness and response project within the One Health approach, an integrated approach to health. So in that sense, we will foster collaboration with the Berlin hub, the WHO hub, to ensure that activities are not only complementary, but can also support each other. And we will ensure that PREZODE promotion of the bottom-up approach can support this work that they will do at the international level, especially as part of its pillar 4, which is about international surveillance and sharing of information at global level.
Thank you very much. Mr. Roche, we were talking earlier about the membership of PREZODE, and we have somebody in our audience asking if you expect the membership of stakeholders such as European federations working on animal health issues. That person mentions FESAS, but there are quite a few others.
Yes, thanks a lot for these questions. Actually, yes, indeed, all the partners that are sharing the vision of this initiative, including Federation of Organizations, are very welcome to join the PREZODE initiative by signing the declaration of support. So as reminded by Jean-François, it is worth pointing out that signing this declaration does not imply a financial contribution. Of course, some countries have already invested in PREZODE, but we need to mobilize also our funding on the long-term, national, regional, including Europe and international scale. So being a partner by signing this declaration does not imply to contribute from a financial point of view to the PREZODE initiatives. Indeed, being one of the partners of the PREZODE initiative will actually allow participating to the international takeoff of this initiative and to have an impact of the strategic scientific agenda as well as on the international governance, which is going to be very crucial moment of the PREZODE initiative for the near future.
Thank you. My next question, and it seems last for this particular round, will be to Mr. Kevit Mr. Kavitz, we have a member of our audience asking, will One Health be a topic in the HE 23-24 work program and the global context, which is considered the inclusion of global partners and so on?
I cannot say at this stage whether One Health would be specifically a topic in the work program 23-24. We are just working on it. As I said, in cluster 1 and cluster 6, they are in the legal basis because we work on the basis for the Horizon Europe of a certain legal basis describing what we are supposed to do in the next 7 years of Horizon Europe. And One Health is mentioned in cluster 1, especially, and also cluster 6. So there will be actions about One Health, but to say whether there would be a specific topic on One Health on itself, I'm not sure that will be the case, but at this stage it's too early to say. But it's clearly mentioned there in the cluster 1 and cluster 2. So different projects. You've heard about what I mentioned as a topic in the work program 21-22, for instance, which was maybe more focused on biodiversity and health. There will certainly be topics comparable to this one in the work program 23-24.
Thank you very much.
And sorry, I take the opportunity to apologize for my colleagues from the Commission coming this afternoon. What I meant is in the session we are in now. I would be the only one. I understood that colleagues had been invited for this session as well, but could not make it.
That is true indeed, but I'm sure your colleagues will forgive you. We know that there are several parts, several directorates of the European Commission who are involved in these projects, and indeed they're pretty far ranging, so you need that cooperation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this first session. We will take a short break, stretch our legs, grab a cup of coffee, and we will be back with you and hope you will join us again in about 15 minutes at 11:45. See you in a few minutes.